But what? So I had a guy, I guess, are any of you guys applying for A&M right now? Have you gotten your letter yet? They're out. I had a guy come, came to me yesterday in tears. This guy's the biggest Longhorn you ever met. And he got rejected from A&M, from UT twice. Which really kind of ticked him off because, it's where he always wanted to go. And it's funny because he's a big Democrat, and with everything with Democrats is they believe in equality and things like that. And he was really upset because he was accepted conditionally until He was accepted conditionally until they let in a lot of more minorities in to make their diversity requirements. And so he got kicked out because he was conditional, but then he didn't make the cut because of who was left to come in. So he came into my office yesterday almost in tears and got accepted to A&M. He was so happy. I'm like, well, that's where you should have gone the whole time anyway. Well, he lives in Caldwell. Like, my kids, I'm like, you're going to A&M. That's where you're going because I have a house here. House and food. I remember college life. You ate everything you could find, and then you're out of food for the next 3 weeks until we have a house. This is what you do. All right. Okay, so let's go back to where we were and pick up and talk about this whole concept of an Michigan canal. Now, we know we're going to build a canal somewhere in that region, okay, of Panama, right? This whole area right here. Now we know it's going to be Panama, I should say. They didn't then. They knew they were going to build somewhere in the narrow part of Central America, somewhere we were going to build it because that made sense. Why did we need it? We needed it because we wanted to be able to get our fleet from point A to point B without going all the way around South America. Okay? And figure out some way to do it and so it'll work better. The problem is, back in 1850, we had signed an agreement with England that, and this is stuff we talked about last time, so you should not be writing this down. What? Yeah, this is all stuff we talked about last time. And so what happens is we have this agreement with England, the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty of 1850, that says, hey, if we, the United States, build a canal, we will do so with our good buddies, the British. All right? But at the turn of the century, England's not really interested in building one, and we are. So we get the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty ratified that says, England, we are going to abrogate, do away with the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty, but we're going to create a canal that's going to be open for everybody. So, England wanted to have a say in the matter at first because they wanted to have use. So what happens now is that we say, you're going to have it. It's going to be free for everybody. Well, it's not going to be free. It's going to be open for everybody. But what? Since you guys don't want to do it, we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. Another major problem was this area is filled with yellow fever and malaria. Why is that a problem? Because you get yellow fever and malaria and you die. It's a very big problem. However, following the conclusion of the Spanish-American War, we are going to discover what causes that. What causes yellow fever? Mosquitoes. And they discover that if you eradicate the mosquito, you do away with yellow fever and malaria. Now, how does that occur? When I was growing up, there's nothing I loved more than being out at twilight. I'm of the generation that you guys, my generation screwed it up for you guys. I'm of the generation where mom and dad didn't care where you were, but as soon as those lights went on, the street lights went on, boom, you better get yourself home. Okay? There's no place I didn't go in I know that's another thing, in growing up in Bruno. Okay? I remember one time I was late, and because the lights were on, and I wasn't around anywhere where there were lights. And I saw my mom driving the streets. I was like, ooh, get out of my car. And I got home way before she did. I'm like, hey, what's going on? I've been here all this time. You know. And I've probably only been there about 2 minutes before she got back. Okay? And I just recorded that, so that's not good. So I'm not too worried about it at this point in time. I doubt she remembers it. All right? So, but you'd be out at night, and you'd hear this truck go by, and it looked like a regular city truck, but then you hear this constant as you went by. What was it? It was a mosquito truck, and it was spraying for mosquitoes to get rid of to try to kill them. Now, how else do you get rid of mosquitoes? How else do you do it? You have standing water. If you've ever let like a little kiddie pool stand, it just leave the water in it for even a day. The next morning, you'll see all these little black things squiggling in it. No, that's all mosquito larvae. Okay, you got to get rid of that. You got to get rid of the standing water, or you use what's now we have little dunkers that's basically put in the water that kills it, but it's still okay. You should drink the water, but it's but then it's not gonna it's gonna kill the mosquitoes. Now, so we have this war basically between these two different types of locations. Nicaragua, which is 200 miles, but it's pretty easy digging. And then you have Panama, which only involves about 50 miles of digging, but you have a whole different series of elevations, so it's going to be more technical. Eventually, Panama wins because Nicaragua is known for its volcanoes. And let's just imagine, we just dug this huge trench, that water goes through, volcano, lava just takes care of it, and it's gone. So a canal at Panama wins out. Now, great idea, you say. Why didn't somebody think of it beforehand? Well, in fact, they did. A French company by the name of the New Panama Canal Company had a franchise, which means permission from Colombia, which was the nation that controlled the area of Panama, that said that they would build a canal there. Now, there was about $40 million worth of equipment in this area that was not being used by the New Panama Canal Company. You know why? Because everybody associated with the New Panama Canal Company was dead, thanks to yellow fever and malaria. So, is it a problem? Yes. But there's $40 million worth of equipment laying around. At first, the New Panama Canal Company, as represented by Philip Bueno Varia, who is their French guy in charge, says, we want to sell this to you, United States, for $110 million. We're like, that stuff's worth $40 million. We'll give you $40 million. And they're like, okay. Because $40 million is what? If you owe $110 million and your entire company is bust and you got to pay it back and somebody's offering to give you $40 million for equipment you can't go and get, probably going to say, okay. So they say $40 million. Sounds good. And the United States, with John Jay, Secretary of State John Jay, is going to negotiate the Hay-Haran Treaty with the nation of Colombia. And this says that Colombia will give to the United States a 6-mile zone on either side of the canal, to Colombia, and they will get $10 million down and $250,000 a year in rent. That's what they will get. Okay? So $10 million down and then $250,000 a year in rent. So Colombia gets this. They get this treaty, they look at it. Then they look at how much longer the French company, the new Panama Canal Company, has on their franchise. And it's a very short time. And they say, well, wait a minute. There's like $40 million of equipment that is just there. Just lying around because nobody can use it in Panama. And we've got just a little bit of time left until this franchise expires. When this franchise expires, what's there becomes ours. So why should we make this negotiation with the United States in which the United States is paying the new Panama Canal Company $40 million for this equipment that in just in a short span of time, it's going to be ours? If we say no, that license will expire, we'll get that equipment, and then the United States will buy it from us. So instead of $10 million, perhaps we get $50 million. So that's what they do. They reject this treaty. Now this makes Theodore Roosevelt very mad. He is going to make some private utterances that are going to come back to haunt him. And he is going to let Philip Bueno Maria and John Hay know that if perchance the area known as Panama was to, declare its independence from Colombia, he wouldn't have a problem with that. Oh, that's nice. So guess what? Panama declares independence. And when Panama declares independence, if you were Colombia, and let's say Colombia and Panama, United States and Texas. If Texas was to say, we're independent, would the United States try to bring us back? Would they? Some people would say, okay. Now listen, I'm asking a question. Would they try to bring us back? Would they succeed? No. Because, we're Texas. And they're like, United Statesians or USonians or whatever they're called. Okay, we're Texans, all right? Okay. So, but they try, all right? So what happens is, oh my, that's all right, so leave it that way. Go away. There it is. So what happens is this area right here is impenetrable forest. The only way the Colombian military is going to get to Panama is to come by boat. I know I just did the same thing. I have few perks in life. Let me have it. So what happens is, in a bizarrely interesting coincidence, as these Colombians are going to invade their rebelling city, in the area just so happens to be the top-of-the-line battleship, the United States Nashville. And this is just in the area, just in the way of these Colombian forces coming to retake their rebelling province. And as they get closer, they notice that the battleship's cannons are pointing directly at them. And as they continue to get closer, the cannons track. And then they find out that the United States has already recognized Panamanian independence, which means that if that ship lands over there, those cannons will go, and they will go, whoop, whoop. So they hightail it back. And Panama is independent. Yay! So what happens? So what happens is once we have arranged for Panama to be independent, in a rather unscrupulous way. We negotiate a new treaty with Hay and Buenaventura, who is now the foreign minister for Panama. And basically, we get a 100-year lease and the same agreement, $10 million down, $250,000 a year rent.
Wait, what was it?
$10 million down, $250,000 a year rent to build this Panama Canal. It was going to begin being built at once, and it will take 12 years to build. Now, Theodore Roosevelt, as you can imagine, is going to get called on the carpet for this heavy-handed action, and he's going to give a speech. I have to read it because I always get it wrong. He gives a speech trying to defend his innocence. So he gets up there and he gives his speech. No, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. What he says doesn't matter. But he comes back down and he goes to the Secretary of State and says, "Have I defended myself?" And John Hay responds, "You certainly have, Mr. President. You were accused of seduction, and you have conclusively proved that you were guilty of rape." Okay, seduction, "Hey baby, how you doing?" versus rape. So, yeah, not good. Not good. Does not make us very well regarded in the Latin American countries, but it doesn't really matter because we don't care at this point. Yes, ma'am?
In this treaty, they give Panama the money, not.
They give Panama the money.
Okay.
They give Panama the money, yes. Now, it's kind of neat how they build it, because what happens, as you see from this previous map right here, is that they come in, and there's this huge lake here. This is Lake Gatun. And they build, Gatun is actually elevated higher than the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. So what they had to do is they create a series of locks. And it's kind of neat how these locks work. So let me put a note here. And what happens is basically, if has these doors that a ship will sail into, and the water will be here, and so the ship will be like that, okay? And then once the doors are closed, they will raise the water up to this height, and then they'll open these doors, and they'll come in here, and they'll raise it up to this height, and then up here it's Lake Gatun, and then at the end, they'll come in, and it's the exact opposite structure, and then, they raise the ship and they lower the ship. Now, it's ingenious. It's really, really neat. And it's finished in 1915. But by the time World War II rolls around, it's completely useless. See, these are fixed widths. Our ships are going to change. Our battleships are going to change. They're going to get bigger. And there's going to be a new ship that was never even thought of when this was built. And it was never even thought of because the weapon that it carries, nobody had even any concept that it could, well, there are some people who believe that, but no concept that it would be as revolutionary to warfare as possible. What is it? Aircraft carrier. Won't fit. Now, when doing the research to try to catch myself up on some of this stuff yesterday, I discovered that China is actually running the Panama Canal now, and they are spending billions of dollars in changing the locks and making them wider so ships can go into it now, bigger ships. So, kind of interesting. Okay, so I already did that. Now, if that didn't put us in good light with the other nations in Latin America, we're going to be involved in an incident in 1902 in Venezuela that's going to really change the way we work. And remember how we talked about the only corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, that it's going to become like it said to European nations that if there's a matter that is causing difficulties between a European nation and a Latin American nation come to us and we'll take care of it. Come to us first. And I said, what's going to happen is Latin American countries are going to try to hide behind us as big brother. Well, that's what happened. And in Venezuela had racked up a series of debts to France, to England, and to Germany. And they refused to pay. As a result, these three nations were talking about going in and occupying Venezuela and forcing them to make restitution for the amount of money that those nations were owed. Theodore Roosevelt said, no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen. So he, as a third party here, inserts himself into the equation and says, Venezuela, you and these other nations, these European nations, are going to sit down and come to terms, and to make sure you know we mean business, we are sending in the Marine to occupy your nation. Okay. Now, when somebody asked him about this, he says, well, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? He says, well, one of the things I believe in is to speak very softly, but also to carry a big stick. Okay, this is known as his big stick policy. Because what is it? Okay. What is he doing? Venezuela? You're going to stop? No. You're going to start doing what you're supposed to. You're going to be good on your debt. You're on your debts. You're going to take care of it. You understand? That's what's going to happen. And anytime you speak soft, there has to be a or else. And don't test me on this. Last class, I had a poor guy jump up. Ah! Spencer knew it was coming. He was laughing. So what happens here is he says, I want to speak softly. You got a big stick. That's called the might of the military. I have a bat upstairs. Let's bring it. It's a foam bat. No, it's a foam bat. Okay, it only hurts just a little. But this becomes the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. He says, we will take care of any issues that these Latin American nations have. And if that means we are going to go in and send in our military, that is going to happen. We would eventually go into the Dominican Republic and Cuba as well and militarily occupy them until they shaped up. But as you can imagine, this does not go very well to increasing how we are viewed by our Latin American neighbors. But at this point in time, we really don't care. Okay, that's not really... We're looking over to Europe. We're not looking south. Over to Europe. That's where our concern is, not south. We're not yes.
So the Roosevelt corollary is big stick.
Is a big stick policy. Any Latin American nation that gets or does anything to invite European disapproval will answer to the United States. Okay. Now, I want you to find a piece of paper somewhere in your notes that you can use and refer to about for the next 3 or 4 weeks at a moment's notice, okay? I want you to put offenses towards Japan. Okay? Because we all know, if you don't know anything about World War II, you probably know Pearl Harbor. Yes? Everybody here has heard of Pearl Harbor, where Japan attacks us during World War II and brings us into the war. Now, a lot of people are like, what did we ever do to the Japanese people that caused all this problem that they're going to do this, okay? People are still like that today. Well, here's the deal. What you do may not be insulting. You may not think it's insulting, but to somebody else it may be considered insulting. So we're going to come back to this time and time and time again as we get closer to World War II. I guess we've got to go back to the start. In 1853, Admiral George Dewey is going to take a fleet of ships into Japan. Japan had always been a very close culture, a closed culture. If you were in a ship that was off their coast and you were shipwrecked and you washed up on shore alive, they would kill you. Because trespassers were forbidden. They did not want your contaminants. They did not want your contagions. They didn't care about your diseases. They just did not want you. Okay? They were of the opinion that some still today, that the Japanese people were the first people ever to come on the face of the earth. And as a result, they were the most pure. This will play a very important role when we get into World War II and the way they fight the war. If you were a missionary in the 1840s and you went to Japan, you would be executed. They believed they were culturally, economically, militarily better than any other nation on earth. Now, wait a minute. You say, how is that possible if they didn't see anybody else? Well, there are some people in this world who think they're the smartest people in the world, and they don't talk to anybody but themselves. Same type of thing. Okay? You want to call it cultural inbreeding, more power to you. But what happens is you have this belief that they are better than every single person else in the world. We all know that the best person in the whole, best type of person in the whole wide world are Texans. Said United States citizens. Okay. So we all know they're Texans. No. There's a difference between Americans, USonians, and Texans. Make sure. Okay. So what happens here? Is Dewey steams into port, and he brings with him the battle fleet, something that Japan has never seen. Reveals to them how small their world is. He forcibly opens up, Dewey does, Japan, by the threat of military might, to open their markets to the United States. We talked about the Sino-Japanese War, in which Japan defeats China, a nation that it should not have defeated had it been fought 40 years earlier. At the end of the Sino-Japanese War, Japan wrests away from China the peninsula of Korea. Okay, so here's China, and here is Korea. After the Boxer Rebellion, you remember a group of part of the group of soldiers that went in and freed Peking were Russians. Well, the Russians didn't actually leave. They kind of stayed in this area right here. And they tried to break off Korea from the Japanese and allow the Russians to have a warm water port. That's going to be very important. It's always been very important, but we're going to go to actually have wars over warm water port. What's a warm water port? Port you can use anytime. Russia needs a warm water port in the Pacific Ocean. It does not have one. Okay? Right here is a place called Port Arthur in Korea. It is fought over by Russia and Japan. Now, who should win? Who do you think would win between Russia and Japan? Russia's been around forever. Militarily, there's a reason they called him. They called Peter the Great. They called Catherine the Great. They were great military leaders. However, enter the equation of Admiral Mahan's dreadnought. What is the history of sea power? What does his book say about naval ships? Okay, largest navy rules the world. Abby, go say the same thing. Okay, so this is what happens. The largest navy rules the world, but here's the kicker. Sometimes it's good to be the younger guy on the block. Back when I was growing up, there was a battle between Betamax tapes and VCR tapes. Okay? Betamax was superior technology. VHS, the Japanese were able to strip it down and sell it probably a fifth of the price of what you could have Betamax. It was a Betamax war. Who won? VHS. You go, that's really old. It is. When you were younger, you probably went through something similar. You had the Blu-ray versus, do you even remember what the other version was? HD DVD war. Who won it? Blu-ray. How did they win it? Sony won it for Blu-ray by marketing PlayStation 3. When it came out, for every single one they lost, every single one that they sold, they lost $100. Every single one they sold, they lost $100. But now they're getting it back. They lost the battle but won the war. HD DVD didn't go anywhere. Go anywhere. Okay? Sometimes it's good to be the young kid on the block because you see what works and doesn't work when you're making decisions. All right? Russia's fleet had been around forever. It had been modernized, but there was a major battle between types of ships this time period that was going on. There is the lesser but bigger guns debate versus the smaller but more gun debate on battleships. Okay? Japan, who's building its fleet pretty much from scratch, adopts the lesser but bigger debate. Russia says, we are revolutionizing our ships, but we're still using the ships that we had. We are going with more guns, but smaller. All right? In this war, there is a major battle, and this is pretty much brings the Russo-Japanese War to an end. It's called the Battle of Takashimi. Don't worry about writing it down. This is just me being a geek when it comes to naval warfare. Because anybody who sees this realizes it is a disaster in the making. In the battle, the Japanese fleet is at anchor. Like this. And as the Russians arrive, they go in piecemeal, one at a time. Okay? They're at anchor. Who cares if you've got 100 ships down here when you're sending them in one at a time? What's going to happen? You're going to get picked off. They actually have 8 ships. Well, 8 battleships, which is the biggest that there were at this time. So they send them in, and they've got, what? More guns, but smaller. What's the problem? With big guns comes big distances. They are able to blow all the Russian fleet out of the water before the Russians get in range. Okay. So guess what? The whole debate, which is better, big guns that are smaller. I mean, a smaller number of big guns versus a bigger number of small guns. It's over. In this battle, Japan defeats Russia. It shouldn't have happened. Defeats Russia. Russia loses 8 battleships and 5 100,000 sailors. Okay? All right? Now, anytime I do something like that, you should say, well, how's the other guy look? How's the other guy look?
How's the other guy look?
There you go. Japan lost 3 torpedo boats. Now, how many guys have some land somewhere that's got a pond? Okay? Or go somewhere, just gone somewhere. In Texas, wherever you have a pond, you got some land on it, you got a John boat. What's a John boat? It's like a $50 aluminum boat that you wouldn't want to go in anything bigger than a pond because it's going to capsize one day. And when it does, you want to be able to swim to the other side, all right? So that's what you want to do, okay? A torpedo boat is basically a John boat with torpedoes on the side of it, okay? It's a little bit bigger. I'm kind of hyperbolizing it. Great.
Wow.
Think of like a pleasure boat, like a little motorboat. Put torpedoes on the side of it. There you go. All right. So that's it. They lose 3 of those. Japan loses 3 of those, and 116 men. 8 battleships versus 100 versus 3. And in this battle, I love this thing right here. France is over here on the side. Here's Russia, here's Japan. France says, keep it up, Russia, you're winning. Russia says, well, if this is winning, what will he do to me if I lose? Because he's getting his clock clean. So, after this battle, Theodore Roosevelt is going to call on both sides, Japan and Russia, to meet him at Fort Smith, Oregon. They do, and they negotiate an end to the war, and it is the Treaty of Portsmouth. Now, the war comes to an end. Because of this, Theodore Roosevelt is going to receive the Pulitzer Peace Prize for his role in this matter. But Japan is going to be insulted in this treaty because it does not provide an indemnity to Japan. And Japan was bankrupt. This war, getting the military, fighting the war, had made them bankrupt. And they were waiting and they were hoping for an indemnity from Russia to pay them, to help them pay off their debts. It does not call for an indemnity, but Japan is going to view this as an insult by the United States. So on your little check marks, there you go. Treaty of Portsmouth. Now, in 1905, a man by the name of William Howard Taft is the military governor of the Philippine Islands. He is going to negotiate with Japan an agreement that is known as the Taft Memorandum. The Taft Memorandum says that Japan can have Korea. They can do what they want to in Korea. However, Japan will stay out of the Philippines. The United States will not involve themselves on the Korean Peninsula as long as the Philippines do not get involved. As long as Japan does not get involved in the Philippines. It's kind of us saying, yours is yours, ours is ours, don't you come messing with us. All right? Got it? Okay. So, Japan says, well, we've got a free hand in Korea. We can do what we want to. The United States isn't going to get involved. Then in 1907, Japan gets insulted because California, which is receiving a lot of Japanese immigrants, passes a law that says all Japanese children will go to the colored school. Okay? We really haven't gotten into this whole concept of race. We'll do that when we get into the civil rights area. But I don't want to really deal with that much now because, it works better when we deal with it right then. So what happens here is you need to understand, and this is something that we have a tendency to do, just as Americans. When we think of the whole segregation issue, we have a tendency to think of it as white and black. Okay? That is not the term that was used. The term that was used was colored. Okay? In Texas, that meant Hispanics. That meant Mexicans. Segregated. All right? Same thing over in California. white children would not go to school with colored children. And for the first time, now California says, that means Japanese. Okay? So the Japanese are like, whoa, are you saying that we, the master race, the first people of society to come into existence on this planet are the same as black people? California's like, yep. They're like, this is an insult. Theodore Roosevelt is going to negotiate a gentleman's agreement, and this is just both sides shaking hands on it and saying, hey, we're buddies, with the Japanese Prime Minister, and says that California will allow Japanese children to go to school with white children. Okay, so Japan gets what they want, but the Prime Minister must make sure that Japan no longer sends or gives visas, passports, to the United States for its citizens. We don't want any more of its citizens. We don't want any more Japanese. Japanese that are here are okay, but others we don't want. No others. Got it? Okay. So Japan says they think we're colored. That's an insult. They don't want us. That's an insult. And so add that to your list. Okay? Now, in 1908, there's a new Secretary of State. His name is Elihu, E-L-I-H-U, Root. Elihu Root is going to negotiate with the Japanese Foreign Minister, Takakura, an agreement that says Japan will abide by the open door policy in China. Remember the open door policy? All of the nations will equally participate in trade throughout China. They will not carve off sections of influence that are contrary to what, that will be not accessible by other nations. So Japan doesn't like this. And the reason they don't like this is because if you know anything about Japan, is that they are very resource poor. Everything that they want for an industrial empire has to be imported. They don't have oil. They don't have iron ore. They don't have coal. All that has to be imported. Now, have you noticed that Theodore Roosevelt's involved in more things than other presidents have before? Yeah, he's like active in everything. Political scientists and historians agree that he is really the first modern president. He is really going to change the way the presidency runs. Now, we've talked a little bit about how society is at this time period, and we've talked about some of the abuses that come with it that led to the creation of the Union. With a lot of these abuses, with a lot of these problems that were going on, and they were not being covered in newspapers. Right? Newspapers weren't paying attention to these things, but other people were. And these people happened to be writers. And what they saw truly appalled them. And what would occur is we would see the birth of a new generation of political writers. Not talking about the political theory, but about how the rights of certain citizens are being abused. These people would be known as muckrakers. They're called muckrakers because they kind of get into the, dirt, mud, and muck, and kind of look for things to bring to the forefront that, like, ew, look at this is nasty. Well, yeah, you're playing in the mud. What do you expect? This is kind of funky. What's up? To try to bring it to the forefront to try to get it to change. Now, there are quite a few of these. Some of these you've probably heard of. Lincoln Steffens wrote a slam piece called The Shame of the City. Ida Tarbell's The History of Standard Oil that pointed out a lot of the abuses and quasi-legal actions of that organization. Upton Sinclair would write The Jungle. Has anyone ever read The Jungle? Okay, I love the book. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. And Thorstein Veblen would write The Theory of the Leisure Class. There's an entire group of people that are so rich they don't have to work, and they just get to hang out. Now, this demand for reform would see the rebirth of the Socialist Party, which we talked a little bit about earlier. Eugene V. Debs is going to be out of prison, and he's going to once again bend his attention to overthrowing the capitalist system, and by doing so, implementing a socialist system. Now, a capitalist system is that the United States, if I wanted to, I could own a business. I could run that business however I wanted and then generate profits. What I do with those profits are my decision. All right? Yes, we understand capitalism. Capitalism, good. Socialism is everything in business is owned by the government, and then the profits are distributed equally. Socialism sounds good. The problem is that it always negates the human component. If I pay you $30 a day, regardless of how hard you work, are you going to work hard? No. This goes back to the Mayflower. When they first arrived, the Pilgrims, they all worked the fields together, and they shared the fruits of the land. And what they discovered is all the women were sick, or they couldn't help, or they couldn't do anything, and so they almost died. Then they changed that, and they said, all right, now you're going to work over this land. This is going to be your lot of land, and you're going to produce the food that you eat. Guess what happened? Everybody worked. Why? Because nobody was taking care of it. Okay? In a socialist society, what happens is the government sets the rates, and then you will then work for them, and you will get paid regardless of how hard you work. You will get paid the same amount. So they work to overthrow the capitalist system and enact a socialist system. Now, another group would emerge during this time, and they'd be more successful because they weren't the red-eyed, bomb-throwing radicals that the socialists were. They're known as the progressives. These are usually middle-class workers who realized there was something wrong in society, and they worked within the existing two-party structure to fix it. And they'd be more successful, substantially more successful than the socialists. Now, during the McKinley's first administration, there wasn't really much of a hand put in controlling these trusts, and the trusts continued to kind of grow out of proportion. Theodore Roosevelt, realizing that in some instances these trusts can be very detrimental to society, begins to take an active interest in doing what was known as trust busting up these trusts because they've gotten too big. Now, what is a trust? Let's remind me, what is a trust? A trust is a company that what? Other companies. That's right. It owns other companies. It doesn't actually produce anything. It's just a company that owns other companies. Well, what do you mean? Okay, well, here's an example. The Northern Securities Company was a company that owned numerous railroads. It was owned by J.P. Morgan. In the early 20th century, the Great Northern Railroad tried to buy out Union Pacific. At first, Union Pacific's stock was going for about $200 a share. But when Union Pacific realized what was happening, they started trying to buy up Great Northern Railroad's stock. So it was kind of like a hostile takeover of each other's company. And what it did is it just drove the prices of both of those companies through the roof. At one point, the Union Pacific gets its stock goes from $200 a share to $2,000 a share. That's speculation. When that occurs, there is nothing keeping the economy from cratering. Today we call that a bubble in our stock market, in which a bubble is created that is artificial, that is going to pop because a bubble can only get so big, right? and then there will be massive sell-offs. There will be a destruction of the economy. There will be millions of people laid off. Well, that didn't happen here with J.P. Morgan's Northern Securities Company when he is going to eventually win and buy the Great Northern Railroad. But it did give him the corner of the market on the east coast of rail line. Theodore Roosevelt would order his Attorney General to bring charges against the Northern Securities Company for violating the Interstate Commerce Act. When J.P. Morgan finds out about this, he sends a telegram to Theodore Roosevelt and says, hey, if we've done something wrong, send your man to my man, and I'm sure we can make it right. Theodore Roosevelt read that and said, he thinks this is a business deal and doesn't realize what he's done. In the end, the Northern Securities Company is broken up, and the court that makes the decision recommends that the Interstate Commerce Commission be strengthened. Congress would respond in 1903 with the passage of the Elkins Act, which made rebates illegal. And then the passage of in 1906 of the Hepburn Act, which gave the Interstate Commerce Commission the power to subpoena records of people, of the companies that they're investigating. Kind of hard to bring charges or investigate someone if you can't subpoena their information. And we can't request it and can't say no to it. I like this picture right here, this cartoon from this era. It's got Uncle Sam right by a legislation buzzsaw, and here is the trust. The trust at this time period were called octopuses. They called them trusts, but they were often drawn as octopuses because they had their hands in every aspect of the community, every aspect of their business. So it says here, Uncle Sam's kind of stroking his beard and says, I wonder if I put this octopus, this trust octopus, through this buzzsaw, if it will hurt the octopus. Well, it's not really the issue. It's not the issue that you're going to hurt it. The issue is that you're going to make things manageable for the little guy and do away with these monopolies. In 1903, another progressive reform is going to be the passage of the Meat Inspections Act. Now, Theodore Roosevelt was a tremendous reader. He usually read about 4 books a day. He'd start in the morning, he'd have a book, and he'd just read it as he went through his day. One morning he's eating his breakfast, and he's reading this book by Upton Sinclair called The Jungle. In this book, The Jungle, it talks about how a family of immigrants come into New York and discover that there's no houses for them there, and they get on a train and they go to Chicago, where there is plenty of jobs waiting. There are jobs waiting, but this guy's job is to push a broom in a meat packing company. And basically, what the goal of what his job was is to make sure the floors are clean. Well, what type of things do you think would be on the floor of the meat packing? Strips of meat, the cuts of, the nasty meat, if the meat falls on the floor, you gotta leave it there. Strips of meat, flesh, blood, what? Flies, okay, hairs, flies, rats, and with rats, what else comes with rats? They're droppings, right? Okay, so this guy's job was to take a broom and then kind of just keep the floor clean, and his job was to scrub it, push it and push it and push it, and he pushed it over to this hole in the wall, and he pushed it through this hole in the wall. That was his job, push it through this hole in the wall, this, droppings of meat, nasty stuff, okay? Now you're supposed to, because you're all critically thinking here, you're supposed to say, oh, thank you, Lord. Yes, thank you. Where does it go? It goes through the hole in the wall, and there's a guy over there who takes everything that he swept up, all this junk, and puts it into this machine that then compresses it, and then puts it into a can, labels and seals it, and sends it out to market. It's called It's called deviled ham.
No.
Oh my God.
Is that where people make candy? Oh my God.
This is a true story. Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. And when he wrote The Jungle, he researched these events. He's a muckraker. He researched these events and took them and all put them into one situation. And, you know, the people were fake, but the events were real. And published it. Now, Theodore Roosevelt's reading this. I'm sure that didn't make him very comfortable. But now, one of the things that happened during this time period is a way that you deal with, you slaughter cows, is you bring them in, remember you bring them in, you know, cattle car loads them into this area, they're brought into this pen, this guy comes along and his job is to slice their throat. No, that's all he does, slice his throat, and he just moves down. This other guy, as they're dying, you know, he comes in with a hook and he impales them right here into the back, and then what happens is, with this hook's attached to this conveyor belt. Once he's hooked them all, they press a button and the cows are hauled up and taken off. And then somebody comes up and they skin them and they pull the skin off of them. And the blood's running out on the floor. And now you still have a problem of getting the meat off the bones. Now how do you do that? What's the best way to get meat off of bones? Quickest way. The quickest way is to boil it. Okay? You ever done a roast? You ever have made a roast? Ooh, it's so tender it just falls off the bone. Right? So what happens is you have these slaughterhouses that have these huge vats of water that are just kept in an open room, in the closed room, that are kept boiling 24 hours a day. And what happens is these men walk around the edge. It's probably about this size of a ledge around it, and they've got spears. Well, why do they have spears? So what happens is they bring the skinned carcass in, and they drop it into this water. Okay? What happens is when they drop it in the water, the boiling water will eventually cause the bones and the meat to separate, and the meat floats to the surface. Okay, so these guys are on the edge, and they've got spears. And they spear the meat that comes up, and they put it on this conveyor belt. The conveyor belt goes down, and then they, make T-bones out of it. And off you go. Okay? Well, every now and then, they would drain these giant vats of water, and to get the skeletons out, because you got the horse. You got the bones. This isn't French. You get the bones of the cows out, right? Well, there's this one section in The Jungle that in which Theodore Roosevelt is reading that causes him some concern, because it relates a situation in which they're getting the skeletons out of the water, out of the drained water tank, and they find 2 human skeletons. Well, if you think about it, if you've ever been into an enclosed room in which there's boiling water, it's foggy, and if you have a steel ledge which you have to walk around, it's going to be slippery. Slipped in. They boiled to death. Their meat floated to the top.
Ew.
Somebody speared the meat, put it over there, and off it went to be packed. Theodore Roosevelt reads that and throws up. He gets Congress to pass the Meat Inspections Act, 1903, that stipulates what is considered acceptable for meat. You see, what happens is there were no guidelines in what type of meat was used or how meat was used. You could have a diseased animal with, missing an eye, pus draining out of open sores on its body, and it was slaughtered just like any other animal and shipped off. You ate it. Now today, if a cow shows up with mad cow disease, we can pinpoint to what range in Wyoming it came from within like an hour. Because you've got all these guidelines of what you can and cannot do. To go along with that, Congress the same year passed the Pure Food and Drug Act. Pure Food and Drug Act states what is considered pure food and drug. Now you guys are laughing at me about the whole Meat Inspections Act. Now if you go to McDonald's, what is there saying? 100% beef used, right? 100% beef. You know what beef means? Cow. Pork means pig. Chicken means. Okay? But when they say 100% beef, they mean hooves, eyes, you name it. Last year, I went to go see my dentist. And I've been teaching, this is my 16th year teaching. And I'm sitting in the chair, and this dental hygienist I've never seen came up to me, and she said, "I think I know you." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Okay." So I started working here. She's like, "Okay." She goes, "I want to say cookies and cream, white chocolate." I laughed and I said, "You were a student of mine." And she was like, "I was?" I said, "Yeah, you were. That's the only reason you would connect that candy bar with me." She's like, "Why?" I said, "Because I grossed you out enough." She said, "Okay." She took me through state government, which I have a similar talk like this that I do. Because we talk about government regulation, why some government regulation is necessary. Good. Yes? We agree? Yes. All right. Okay. So I would talk about the Pure Food and Drug Act. And I said, I do not like chocolate. Okay? I'm hypoglycemic, which means my body does not know what to do with the sugar I put into it. So I'm very conscious about what I put in, what I eat. I said, but there's one weakness that I have. Superman has kryptonite. My weakness is Hershey's Cookies and Cream white chocolate bars. Okay? They are so pretty. Okay, so I have to be careful with that. And so what happens is, I'm hungry right now. My stomach is growling. And I'm ready to go eat lunch. Every Thursday I go to Wings and More, not Wings and More, Buffalo Wild.
60 cents.
What?
60-cent wings.
60-cent roast meat. I'm ready to go. I'm hightailing it out of here. But I know you guys are getting ready to go to lunch too, so you're all excited about that. But, Pure Food and Drug, what that means is that when I enjoy that chocolate 12-ounce candy bar that I love, that is just so yummy, is I can rest assured that it is pure food because the government says so. Now, what qualifies as pure food and drug? Haley, you're grossing out over there. You all right? All right? What qualifies as pure food and drug in today's standards? A 12-ounce chocolate bar, in order to meet the government standards for being pure food and drug, pure food, must have less than 3 cockroach legs per 12-ounce bar, or half of a cockroach body.
What?
Are you serious?
So that's in every chocolate bar.
No, I'm not saying it's in every chocolate bar. I'm saying if they exceed that standard, they can't ship it. They can't sell it.
So they can have a cockroach.
Yeah, they can have
3.
have 3 cockroaches.
Lindsay. Lindsay's like, people eat bugs. Okay, so
When I had biology, I had this great guy. His name was Jerry Wheat, greatest guy. I had his awesome, the whole country boy. He said the worst thing that you can eat in modern times, I don't know why you're putting stuff up, I've got 5 minutes left, is peanut butter. I love peanut butter.
why?
all blended together. You don't know what's in it. I will not eat chunky peanut butter.
Oh, oh my
Because
God.
I always, every time I bite into it, I'm like, what was that? Yeah, what was that? But thanks to Pure Food and Drug Act, we can pretty much figure out what it is. Now, Theodore Roosevelt, as I said, he is kind of the first modern president, is also going to take an active role in negotiating with labor unions. The United Mine Workers, an early labor union, is going to go on strike in 1902 and would bring the mining of anthracite coal to a standstill nationwide. They demanded a closed shop and a 10% raise. Well, they got the 10% raise 2 years ago. Now they wanted another 10%, and the management said, no, absolutely not. But they also wanted a closed shop. What that means is they wanted everyone who worked at their mines to be a member of the United Mine Workers. Okay? That's a closed shop. Theodore Roosevelt is going to let this go on for a while, but eventually he's going to start growing concerned. As spring gives way to summer and summer starts to give way to fall, he realizes anthracite coal is the heating coal that is used in the majority of houses over the winter. And at this point, the United States' supply of anthracite coal is dangerously low. So he intercedes and commits both sides to arbitration. In the end, he gets the workers a 10% increase in pay, although they also agree to work an extra hour instead of an 8-hour day, a 9-hour day. At the end, Theodore Roosevelt announces that this is a square deal. Everybody got a square deal. There wasn't a rectangle deal where somebody got a little bit more than others. It's a square, equal on all sides. Now, you probably think this is the end of his administration. This guy's done so much. We're just getting started. He was never elected to this position, you will remember. He comes into office as the youngest president ever in 1901 when McKinley dies. And in 1904, he runs for his own term. It may look close up there, but remember, the only reason the South is blue because it's the solid South. They vote Democrat regardless. The Democrats nominate Judge Alton B. Parker. Probably the worst candidate that they could have found, but they didn't want to use William Jennings Bryan again, so they just find some old dude and say, hey, go stand up there and let Theodore Roosevelt defeat you. And that's what he does. He defeats him. Theodore Roosevelt gets his own term. All right, we'll end there for the day.